and welcome back to the Library of Chaos. I'm Wozni.
And I'm Obru.
And I'm still here for some reason.
This time we are looking at Ragnar's Claw. Obru, why don't you start us off on this one?
So I feel like, I guess a good summary of the story would be, we already know Ragnar. We know a lot about the Wolf chapter. In this story, we meet a bunch of characters from outside of the chapter who are more diverse cast from the 40k universe. And also, they then go on an adventure to try and unite the Triforce and save a planet from destruction, death. We'll see. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Ragnar's Claw is a Saturday morning cartoon. It is a fun, silly adventure where Ragnar and his gang go on a planet-hopping adventure around the Imperium to find the 3 pieces of the thing that will stop the bad guy. It's about as simple narratively as you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about right. We get to see their first adventure, leaving Fenris. That's the basic setup.
The first adventure is like, I mean, here's the thing. You can tell this is trying to sell 40k because it's...
And here is where I must interrupt Jimbus in editing to say, spoilers ahead.
You can tell this is trying to sell 40k because it's squeezing as much 40k into it as possible. Look, they fight orcs. Look, they fight gene stealers, Tyranids. Look, they fight demon. It's literally squeezing
all of that is spoilers.
everything of 40k. I don't give a shit. You can tell that this book is basically, again, like Space Wolf. Space Wolf is selling the universe in one way. This one is selling the universe in the second way by showing as much as it can. It has an Eldar in it. This book is... The only things that's missing are Tyranids and...
it's not missing Tyranids.
No, it's got Tyranids. Sorry, because you steal shit.
I mean, technically the first one also had all of these too.
The only things that's missing are Necrons and Tau because they haven't been created yet. If this book had been written a couple of years later...
Though.
Oh yeah, we do. So the only thing that's missing
I think they were
Tau.
supposed to be Necrons, right?
I don't think they were, but yes.
Well, I basically front-loaded the most important point of this book for you, which is that it exists to sell as much of 40k as it can possibly have within its word count. And that's probably the biggest problem with it, is the thing is cramming way too much into it. It doesn't quite leave as much room for breathing. I mean, it is enjoyable. It's watching an action movie, reading an action movie, essentially. I mean, when we go through the individual scenes, let's point out where they were inspired from. So there's like Alien and Mad Max.
So I agree. I don't feel like it felt crammed, but looking at it, like when you put it this way, oh yeah, I can't deny it. It didn't feel crammed the way you did it, but I think that's possibly because I knew of a lot of these things. And I think, like, I want to contrast this against the previous book and say, while the previous one was, if you don't know much about 40k, that's fine. This is introducing you to things. This doesn't introduce you to things. It throws them at you. It throws things at you that you, like, it's probably better if you already know of them. I wouldn't want to learn about the things that you find here just from this book, which is... normally, like, and that's sort of, I guess, more of a commonplace thing later on when we look at 40k stories. But in this one here, it felt like quite a stark contrast to the first book.
I definitely agree with that. So you have, as Jim was kind of saying, you meet almost all of these aspects of the 40k established lore, and as you said, they are very much thrown at you. You don't get a time to really understand. The only understanding you get of them is Ragnar in the background, almost giving like a Pokedex readout. It's like, oh, this is a Tyranid. I learned about this from the information crown that injected this into my brain. And that's in the background. Every time he meets a new thing, it's just that.
The thing I want to say to you, is when you say this is not the way I want to meet it, are you meaning that's not the way you want to meet it in a narrative sense? Because don't forget, this is there to sell models. This is there for someone to go, oh, this thing is awesome, and then they go into a Games Workshop, ask the guy at the counter what X thing is, and he's like, oh, the orcs are X, and then, of course, he steers a conversation to sell some orcs to this impressionable young man or woman.
So,
yes.
I guess both narrative sense and also as someone being introduced to the lore. Like, I am not going to learn about this thing. Like, it's you get like the quickest crash course in what a thing is, and you only get that for some of the things. Some of them, it's just almost like it expects you to know about it. And
yeah, I mean, as I said, like you all the information you're getting is usually from Ragnar's like thoughts, and it's usually to him talking about how he had this information injected into his brain, and that's it.
So here's a question for you: how different is like Ragnar's narrative from the color piece on the back of a codex? How different is like Ragnar's thoughts on, say, orcs from the back piece of Codex Orcs?
Well, I mean, as I said, most of these sound like Pokedex entries, so they could very well be exactly the Codex entry off the back of the thing.
Which is the point. That's the whole point. They're trying to sell you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. What you're saying, it makes perfect sense now, looking back at the way the story is structured and everything.
That makes sense.
It also feels like it kind of feels like a bunch of, say, Commissar Kane stories compressed into one. Because I always felt like his stories were very much like that as well.
Yeah, I get you.
I'll say this: Kane's stories are not as, we'll say, globe-trotting. I mean, this thing does feel like an old pulp adventure. They're jetting around the world. Indiana Jones. Which was inspired by the same thing.
Oh, there's some Indiana Jones scenes in this.
Oh, there
Holy
absolutely
crap.
is. This is, I would say that this is Indiana Jones Space Wolf edition.
Okay.
There's definitely some Indiana Jones scenes in here.
I see it. I will say there are some themes carried on from the previous book. One, we definitely still have a very heavy like internal monologue style thing, and it feels like more.
It's used even more. Yeah, it's definitely used more bluntly as well.
Yeah, more present. His omnipresent narrative, internal monologue is always there, and the Styrbjörn thing is like still being played into. Him and Styrbjörn are still there.
But it is sort of being forgotten though. So throughout the course of this book, it will slowly disappear until like it's basically just gone. At the end, it just sort of disappears, along with Styrbjörn.
It's still
for the most part, he's still there, but he's just not really talked about much.
It's still, you're seeing some of the characters, and we're seeing how they develop, and like the way it interacts with the characters. You've got the same guys, but like I feel like King's focus changes a bit on which characters he's looking at.
Oh, definitely. There's one character in particular that he seems to take a particular.
Oh, you're talking about Sven, because Sven is like fascinating to me how he becomes more and more important with each book, because he is the Samwise to Ragnar's Frodo.
That's a very good description.
Well, the story begins with suddenly, a bunch of visitors from beyond the stars, a bunch of normal Imperials come to Fenris. So it's the first time we're having contact between our characters and the wider Imperium. And it turns out to be an Inquisitor Sternberg.
And an apprentice Inquisitor.
Sorry.
And his apprentice.
His apprentice Inquisitor, whose name is it Kara Isan or something like that?
Something like that.
Kara Isan. So Inquisitor Sternberg, his Deputy Inquisitor in training, Kara Isan, and a bunch of their people, including, what's the name of the general guy? He's like important going forward.
The general guy? He's on the ship. We don't see him yet.
Oh, he's on the ship.
Mr. Henchman Leader. Yes.
Ghoul, I think it is, or something like that.
The head goon.
Yeah, that's not a.
He's basically the Inquisitor's head goon.
Yeah, Ghoul. Commander Ghoul is the commander of his defense. Who we will get to it later on. I'm sure we definitely want to talk about him later on. I won't talk about it now, but there's some very interesting traits about his description.
Okay.
Here's the thing, he's so blatantly telegraphed as a bad guy. It is a Saturday morning cartoon. Inquisitor Ghoul, he looks evil. Ragnar smells
an evil name.
About him. He's an evil name. Who's going to betray them at the end? Place your bets, ladies.
I didn't expect that, because I felt he was just like, oh, he's just a generic ship guy. He's like, he's just like the guy who's in charge of the work, basically. The work being people with guns for an Inquisitor. And then he basically just immediately gets forgotten about for most of the book. So I had practically forgotten he existed when he betrayed us.
It's the exact same problem that we had in Gaunt's Ghost with what's his name, the merchant guy whose plot arc is just forgotten for half the book.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, despite what you said there with like Ragnar smelling and thinking there was something definitely odd about him, I didn't. There was only one thing that kind of made me suspicious of this character, and it was none of that. I'll bring it up in a bit.
See, I didn't know. I didn't have reason to believe there would be a betrayal plotline, so I was not like ready for that. I guess I knew something was up, but I thought I was expecting Inquisitor shenanigans.
I was so used to the tropes of it that like I saw and like he's going to betray them at the end of it, and like lo and behold, he did.
Yeah. Fair enough. A good read on that.
This thing that loves the story loves its tropes, and it will dig deep into them.
All right.
So something worth mentioning: we completely skipped the prologue,
which is
skipped about the first 5 chapters. We're going to be jumping all over this book.
But I get what you mean. Yeah. So prologue. It starts off again. We're in the present, and it's looking back, and then it stops and looks back.
King does this every time.
So at the start, and this time, it did not mention Maddox. It mentions some Nurgle sorcerer corrupted guy. And then when he dies, the thing gives a very Nurgle-sounding name and is like, what's the Nurgle thing's name again?
It's botulism. It's based on botulism.
Mr. Botulism. He says
Lord Botula. It's like Dracula, but he's Botula.
Lord Botula.
The worst kind of breakfast cereal.
All of the names are like... They're like the villains in a cartoon or a movie.
Unlike Maddox, Botula does pass the vibe check for a Nurgle entity.
Oh, it's not hard to do. Nurgle entities are like surprisingly
just named after diseases. Like almost all of them I know are named after diseases of various kinds. Yeah, typhus, exactly.
Yeah.
But I love how on the nose it always is, though. It's always something like that. But interestingly, in that prologue, some things to note: we see an Ogrin. Like this is the first case of actually seeing an Ogrin that is actually an Ogrin in a 40k story that I've seen. And also we're introduced to Brother Olaf, who just disappears in a fireball, like just vanishes.
Oh, he's one of in the prologue, a foolhardy bloodclaw who. Well, that's not a fireball. It's more like a plague ball, isn't it?
Well, I'm sure it's described as like a puff of fire,
a blast
and
of
then
sorcery, essentially.
Yeah, he just vanishes.
Yes.
But I was wondering if Brother Olaf was going to appear in the story somewhere, and then we would know that he dies later, but he didn't. So
well, he was a bloodclaw. Like that was something in the prologue. You don't actually know in the first, both in Space Wolf and in this book, and also initially in the next one, you don't immediately know like what position Ragnar is in when he's telling that prologue. You get the idea he's like got some seniority. He's calling some orders. Is he like a bloodclaw sergeant? Is he a Grey Hunter? Is he something more? You're kind of left. I found myself wondering, like, what is his
what
state?
Position is Ragnar in the present
that
state.
frames the book? Yeah.
No, that's an interesting point. We aren't really given any names yet, and we probably wouldn't know a huge amount of them even if we were given them, because we don't know anything about Wolf Lords. We don't know anything about the Great Wolf yet, because that is all about to come up.
Sure. So this book is it's very coy about that in the present framing. Well, getting back into it. We missed another thing after the prologue before the Inquisitors arrive, which is Ragnar and Sven waving their dicks around at each other.
Yeah, I think this is a common occurrence.
Or is that
the next?
Ragnar and Sven's romance is like one of the fun things about these series.
Am I getting confused? Am I getting confused with Grey Hunter there?
No,
I'm not sure. And they do it throughout the rest of the stories, because now Sven will become like his best friend basically, and they spend the entire time arguing with some very, very, very obvious insults that they will throw at each other repeatedly throughout the entire book.
Oh, I just remembered an insult that was thrown at somebody in the last book. I forgot to mention it last episode. He told I think it was Sven, told the Space Wolf from the sheep farming tribe that that the monsters are not the only thing the sheep have to worry about being bothered by. I thought that was interesting.
Well, he made that joke. That was actually the third time that he had made a sheep-related joke within about 4 paragraphs.
How do you two feel about that? To
give you an example of Sven's humor throughout the rest of the series.
How do you two feel about that?
I disagree.
I mean,
here's the thing. Sven
we're not talking about that, wasn't it?
I saw that and thought, I need to raise this with my Kiwi and Welsh podcast buddies.
Oh, wonderful.
I personally really like the random banter that we see between the Space Wolves because it makes them seem more real. Like the only experience I have of Space Marines is Horus Heresy for the most part, and in Horus Heresy they're all so incredibly uptight, like beyond.
Like there are actually
ridiculously
comments.
uptight.
There are comments in those books, even in universe, of them having sticks up their asses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if this is what all Space Wolves are like, I'm suddenly a huge fan of the Space Wolves. So this book has succeeded.
These are also the Blood Claws.
Here's a fun... Yeah, they kind of lose a bit of that as they get older. But here's a fun thing. So this thing about them supposed to be acting more human, that's something that's going to come up in a later series of books about a similar chapter, and oh boy, are we going to have fun with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I doubt it'll be as silly as this.
Okay.
Oh no.
So it would have to be something pretty
okay,
special.
so where the hell were we? We keep on getting lost.
Well, okay.
So the Fang is visited...
Yeah, it's visited by the Inquisitors.
They're getting visited by Inquisitor Sternberg, Inquisitor Isan, and they're here for an audience with the Great Wolf. Now, this is an interesting thing, because this actually goes against lore that would come much later, where the Great Wolf would never have a thing to do with Inquisitors at all, because he fucking hates their guts.
Granted, I believe...
Is it the same Great Wolf?
Yes, Logan Grimnar, right?
Yes, Logan Grimnar.
It was implied he had like a previous working relationship with this Inquisitor, I think.
Yes. It was implied that this Inquisitor had saved his life at some point in a previous battle.
Yeah.
And then he had sworn a debt to him, which he was then coming to call on.
And with this Inquisitor dead by the end of the book, there are no other Inquisitors that Logan Grimnar trusts.
That would make a lot of sense. Also, this Inquisitor turned out to have been wrong throughout the entire book as well, which would probably not have helped either. Some interesting things of note. In this story, we get Ragnar arguing with himself almost immediately when these Inquisitors arrive, to the point where he's like, "The wolves are super loyal. We're super like stalwart for the Emperor." And then almost immediately in the same sentence, he smells something slightly strange and wants to murder the Inquisitors.
And he's like, "Wait, no, I shouldn't do that.
I probably shouldn't do that." Yeah, so I don't know whether this is is something that starts to build a bit in the way King will write internal monologue for Ragnar, which is that he will incorporate the beast within a lot into Ragnar's kind of internal monologues.
Mm-hmm. He has a spider sense tingling around the Inquisition, or his wolf sense, and he's trying to rationalize.
Well, this is the smell.
Away. He's trying to rationalize it away, and he can still feel something is up.
This is the supernatural sense of smell that somehow allows him to pick up this specific sense of like smell of the Inquisitors across the room in a room full of other people, and be able to tell almost what they're thinking based on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's unreal.
Well, you
are so hung up on this point, aren't you?
Do you want to know?
It comes up more and more and more and more throughout the stories to a point where it's just beyond.
Trust me, there is so many more Space Wolf novels in the future where the Space Wolf's preternatural senses are very much a part of it. So trust me, actually it'd be interesting to hear your points when you get used to it, but also how you compare how King writes it to say how Chris Wright writes it in his Space Wolf books.
All right.
You want to know a point that stuck out to me that I just couldn't get over in this initial scene with the Inquisitors?
Go on.
The throne is a hover throne.
Yes,
you can point at people.
Floats.
The throne floats, and he floats on the throne.
He floats. That's the best bit.
Here's a funny thing. People about 15 years later would have long, angry rants on 4chan and other places complaining about Logan Grimnar's hover sled when he had this hover throne all the way back in 2000, which is just as silly, but why did nobody bother thinking a fuss about it then? But when there's a model of him riding a version pulled by two wolves, they suddenly kick up a hell of a storm.
So yeah, it's described as you said, he is hovering above the throne, which is also hovering. But like
the way it describes it is like he's obviously hovering on it. Otherwise, it'd be really uncomfortable to sit on that.
Well, no, Ragnar says like something about. So it was really strange, and this comes to the next point I was trying to make. That he says something like, Ragnar, points out, as you said, that it would be very uncomfortable, and there's other reasons for that, which I won't get into now. And he just says that. And leaves that hanging, and it's just like, What do you mean? And there's other reasons for him to hover above the throne. Quick point. I mentioned in the last one that it explicitly says that 35 is like the oldest anyone ever gets to on Fenris.
Mhm.
So in this, we get another indication where it says the Great Wolf is 700 years old, which is 10 times the normal lifespan of a Fenris.
Yes, but he's also a space marine, as opposed to Ragnar saying there's only 35.
Yes, but what is 700 divided by 10, wasn't he?
Oh, wait. Oh,
70, right? Which is double what we'd previously been told as the lifespan.
I follow.
Yeah,
10 times
so I just thought that
lifespan
was kind of weird.
Man.
Like right at the beginning of both the first and second books are 2 ages given for Fenris people who are just completely contradictory.
Huh. Okay.
Well, again, the lore was evolving, and I think the Space Wolf Codex, the 3rd edition one, might have come out between Space Wolf and Ragnar's Claw. I have to double check, but if the Codex did come out, then they would have rewritten the lore in this book to equal.
Do you know what else changed between those two statements from Ragnar about the ages of people in Fenris? Ragnar wore the crown of knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. He knows more about it. Now. Yeah. So this is where we're introduced to the Great Black Pyramid as well, when the Inquisitors start telling why they're here and what the problem
Pyramid is. And that they need to get the 3 parts of the Triforce to open the pyramid.
Yes.
And that they're here to collect
Saturday morning cartoon.
Well, I have to now correct something you said earlier, because this story is not about them collecting the 3 pieces. It's a story about the Inquisitors collecting the 3 pieces, but the Space Wolves start with 1. And that's when they join their journey with their part, the Triforce of Courage, let's say.
It's like one of those fetch quests where the NPC goes, here is one of them. This is what it looks like. Go find the others.
That's what I was going to say. This is a fetch quest novel.
Yes.
And the fetch quest, of course, is an excuse. Each fetch quest is a different adventure on a different place against a different foe. So we can see as much of the 40k universe as it can possibly squeeze into its limited page count. Yes. Page count, good lord, sorry about that.
Look, if you hadn't said anything, that would have just been written off as a Kiwi accent.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It was a Freudian slip.
So what is the deal with the Eldars building these like black stone constructs? Like, is this like a proto Blackstone fortress? Is this like proto Necron structures? Like,
it sounds
because obviously the Necrons probably
generic sci-fi alien made mystical structure.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, here it's a pyramid. What do pyramids conjure in your mind? It's shorthand.
Well, in 40k it's Necrons, but if it wasn't for 40k, I don't know, like
curses, which kind of fits, I guess, because curse is coming up very shortly.
Yeah, I mean, this is like an episode Mummies Alive turned into a whole Space Wolf book.
Having now seen the introduction to that show after you showed us that, thank you, Jim. Yeah, it looks like an interesting show, and if it's anything like this book, then I should probably check it out at some point.
It totally isn't. Trust me, 90s nostalgia colours everything I see about that thing. It is probably a load of shit.
Well, let's get back to the pyramid later, because we're going to reach the pyramid. First thing that happens is there is a...
You need to find the information on the data looms deep in the Fang, so get a bit of time seeing how the Space will store information.
Oh yeah, Ragnar gets to show the Inquisitors around the Fang. He's chosen because he's new and doesn't know anything, and therefore, while he doesn't trust them, and what's his name? The Wolf Priest from the last one, whose name we haven't said in this whole time, and I can't remember his name.
Tarok or something like that?
Was it Lars?
No, I don't think it's Lars.
Was it Rennick?
It's the old man with the iron skin.
It's Rannick. It's Rannick.
Yeah,
it is Rannick.
I knew I remember it.
Rannick, him here plays a key part at the start of this story, because he goes, "Hey, Ragnar, I notice you don't trust this. I also don't trust this. I've been told to arrange for someone to escort these guys. You've got good instincts, and also you don't know anything too dangerous that they aren't supposed to know about. So how about you handle this job?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay, that sounds sensible."
This is one of the interesting things there, like a first bit of like internal chapter politics about how Logan Grimner might trust this man, but I don't, and
yeah,
So,
yes. So we get a very small amount of politics in this book, and then it kicks off like real in the next one. So
I do wonder if
wouldn't
William King was not aiming to do his own Gaunt's Ghosts with Ragnar in the place of Gaunt.
I'd read it. This book series was a lot of fun.
That's the thing is the fourth one is.
Don't talk. Hey! I haven't read the fourth one. Don't tell me.
But the thing about it is,
there's a fourth one.
Yes, and if we compare it to these three, it really does feel like what William King was kind of doing was almost his own Gaunt's Ghosts with Ragnar Blackmane.
That's amazing.
Well, that's funny because I'm going to have comparisons against Gaunt's Ghosts for the next one.
Okay,
but I want to save that for the next one.
Now, can we talk about the giant stone computers?
One sec. There is an obligatory mention, due to facts that you mentioned earlier. There is an Imperial Guard commander with them. I forgot. His name is Byron Powys, which is just about the Welshest name that you could possibly have. So, got some representation there in the 40k.
Yes, Welsh representation. Like Birmingham, the Black Planet is full of evil.
What?
That is from really old lore. That's from, I think, Rogue Trader, or possibly 2nd edition. There's a planet in Imperium called Birmingham. It's called the Black Planet. It's like this...
Wait, so this is the... Yeah, well, I mean, that's how Birmingham was betrayed, because it was like that in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings as well, isn't it? It's the Blacklands is basically Birmingham, or whatever it is.
But the thing is, they like that in there.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. I didn't know about that. There is another element as well before we get to the machine computers things that I have to mention because I hate it. I hate it a lot. There's prophecy. Again, more prophecy. And not even just prophecy this time. This time, they're using something called the Imperial Tarot, which...
Oh, that comes up a lot, and a lot of books have got the tarot. So different psychers have different ways of reading the future. Sometimes you have like casting rune bones. Some people use tarots. There's different things.
They use tarot cards. They're actually using tarot cards.
Yeah, hell yeah. And different psychers have their own different methods that they trust and methods they distrust. And you see that here. The Space Wolf, the Rune Priests are like, well, we don't trust the tarot. And he's like, yeah, I did it over and over though and got the same result. Yeah.
Are there any psychers that don't trust any of these? Because these all sound like gibberish, to be honest.
You probably...
You sweet summer child, wait until you get really deep into the weird psycho-centric story.
I hate it. I hate all this prophecy stuff.
You said, okay, I like the prophecy stuff here because there's actually slightly conflicting prophecy. There's interesting dynamics to the prophecies here, which I want to get to later on when we talk about the ending, I think.
So the only reason that I can feel like they introduced the prophecy here was because these Inquisitors turn up, and despite the fact that the Great Wolf has like a prior relationship with this Inquisitor, the Inquisitor basically turns up and says, I want one of your sacred relics, a sacred relic that was entrusted to you to prevent a great disaster, and I want to take it away from this planet. And anyone, would be like looking at this like, there's no way the wolves are going to go with this, right? But the prophecy steps in and the wolves come back, the Rune Priests come back, and they're like, holy shit, you need to do this right now. and the plot is just like, okay, I guess we're doing it then.
Yeah.
Because otherwise...
You have to suspend that level of yourself to really appreciate 40k books, because that's the kind of thing they all, certainly many of them, truck in. There is a mystical aspect of 40k that's quite out of line with the sci-fi. It's a blending of science fiction and pure high fantasy.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't mind it, I guess, but I don't know. The prophecy just gets to me a bit sometimes.
Well, the prophecy is an excuse. It's an excuse that we need to go and collect the things. We need to go and collect the bits of the amulet, and so the prophecy can be fulfilled or not fulfilled or whatever. I mean, the use of prophecy in fiction, Dune uses it.
Well, Gaunt's Ghost uses it liberally, but I mean, I complained about it in that as well.
It's a 40k thing. It's all throughout 40k's DNA, right down to the very bottom. So, kind of complaining about it is complaining about the very essence of what 40k is, or at least what it used to be. I don't know if it's that way anymore.
I will not mention it again, but
yes, you will.
I had to mention it once.
So,
okay,
the
obligatory mention of the prophecy every book.
So, Ragnar's leading them around. And the reason he's leading them around, one of the things he's leading them around for is because they have got to wait a while because of the angry librarian who tells him to fuck off and let him do his work. And his
Yes.
work involved using a computer system which is like a fusion of like an archiving system and a bunch of fucking stone tablets.
It's
Yeah,
an
apparently
archiving
from-
system as done by Gary Larson. Again, that whole thing reminded me of a Far Side cartoon.
So apparently it was also the archiving computers were also from before the dark ages of technology, which is kind of interesting.
Not during.
Yes. So supposedly from before, but retrofitted many times by the Iron Priests. But in this time, while we wait for the archivist to do his thing, we get to see two pretty cool things. One is we find out that the Fang is built on the top of the largest mountain on Fenris, and potentially the largest mountain in the Imperium. Yes, supposedly. Which must be pretty damn big.
So, it has to be pretty damn big. So, let's go into some fun science shit, shall we?
Oh, God.
How do they breathe?
No, it's not even that. So, our atmosphere extends 60 miles up. And that has to be how high the Fang is. The Fang has to be 60 miles high because it literally goes into space. Now, for comparison's sake, the tallest mountain on planet Earth is Mount Everest, and that's about 8 kilometers, I think. How much is 8 kilometers in miles?
I think it's a bit more than that.
Okay, maybe it's a bit more than that. How high is Mount Everest?
I will quickly Google it. It is 8.8 thousand meters. So it's almost 9 kilometers, but yeah, closer than I thought.
So, say 8 miles.
It's
not 8 miles.
That's more like
miles.
6 miles, isn't it? 5 or 6 miles.
5/8.
Okay.
So it's about 5 times as high as Mount Everest, give or take. That's
so
big.
Mount
and of course,
Olympus,
when you see all the images of it,
Olympus Mons on Mars is 3 times higher than Everest, I believe. So even within our solar system, there is a mountain that is approaching the level of the Fang. The Fang's
but then you
mountain.
see the actual pictures of the Fang they do later, where the Fang does not look like a mountain at all.
The Fang
and you can clearly tell it's artificial.
Yeah, there's a big
because it's basically a giant spire made out of rock.
That's crazy. Does it look like a Fang though? Is that the point?
Yeah, actually, it does look like a Fang.
Oh my god,
that would make sense.
So,
it's literally tooth shaped.
He shows off some wonders to the Inquisitors.
Yes, and the second thing, we see them fighting, and it's a really interesting style of fighting. So we see like they use their capes, weighted capes.
Oh yeah,
as like a sort of
the Inquisitors fighting in different I guess the implication is the Inquisitors
having a sparring match.
Yeah,
in anticipation for combat to come.
I think you mentioned they have an interesting style, but I feel like the implication was they've trained to fight in different styles. And this was them sparring.
Oh, they are, but the interesting thing is the way they're talking about fighting with the cape. That's a method of gladiator combat, except instead of a cape, they tended to use nets.
Yeah, and then they mention that Ragnar specifically mentions that it looks like they've trained to fight with weapons that are concealable or not specifically designed to be weapons, which could be relevant later depending on what happens.
I actually really like the description of that fight as well.
Yes.
And it's a very nice little... King is very good at this. He's very good at taking a moment and blowing it up and exploring the detail of it in a way that makes it interesting.
Yes, which is a strange thing when you compare that to, as you said, the way he does a lot of the world building, which is, again, you have Ragnar thinking about it or explaining it.
Mm-hmm.
In many regards, he's kind of very selective as to where he uses the show don't tell for moments that I guess are more important narratively than background information designed to sell a toy soldier to someone.
Well, you say that, but even though the world building comes mostly from Ragnar, it is also coming from all of his interactions, like the fact that in the first book, obviously we see him living in the world. I feel like that is relatively showy.
Well, it's also interesting because, again, Ragnar is literally our avatar, our window into the world of 40k, and he's been deliberately structured so he can introduce us to the universe of 40k. He's just a guy on a small planet.
Yes.
At the very bottom.
Ragnar learns things and we learn them with him.
Yes.
And that, of course, ties into the fact. The other thing I find is interesting is as each book comes along, it introduces a bit more of the 40k universe, but it also continues Ragnar's journey. So we kind of grow with him in both our understanding of the 40k universe and what it means to be a space marine fighting in it.
Yes. Well, he definitely gets a crash course to pretty much everything. Almost everything the 40k world universe has to offer in this book, particularly.
In this one book, because again,
as you said, you kind of throw everything at the wall and see what happens.
Well, it's more like they're trying to. I mean, normally, say if Abner had been writing this, he would have taken a whole book for each of the sections as just one of the fetch quests to get the bit of the Triforce.
But remember, First and Only, it's hopping locations quite a lot. It's got several significant locations.
The First and Only is the most unique of the Gaunt's Ghost books, and it's the least like what Gaunt's Ghost would become.
Well, that and the second one barely feels like a Gaunt's Ghost book. It feels like an anthology book. But yeah, I get you.
You're jumping locations, but the difference being, I think the first Gaunt's Ghost book, it doesn't introduce all of the enemies that we don't know yet. It's specifically, most of it is fighting other humans or other chaos, chaos spawn humans. Not chaos spawn humans, chaos
space marines at some point.
Space marines
and other forces of chaos.
Forces of chaos, yeah. So something else happens while they're waiting for this story. Something quite important.
Mm-hmm. Ragnar starts to get the hots for Kara.
They have an interaction that is quite interesting in this context. Yes.
So I'm going to now say a very strange thing. Is the fact that Ragnar had sex before he became a space marine somehow tied into the fact that even after becoming a space marine, he's still kind of... He's like Indiana Jones, despite the fact that he's a gelded space marine whose dick doesn't work. In every book, the woman.
So he's eyeing up.
This was something I wanted to ask. Yeah, this was something I wanted to ask about, because I always have this image of the space marines as almost like eunuchs. So, like, in ancient times, the eunuchs were kind of trusted because they don't have this sort of, they don't have the male.
This is the thing with space marines in general. They are like completely sexually detached generally.
Yes,
and Ragnar is not. Ragnar is like, I like the look
very
of that.
much not.
With women, he's a space marine who flirts with women. That's kind of. It's funny because there's a moment in a Horus Heresy short story that's so far away and so far removed that reminds me of this, where it's a space marine getting flirted with by women who's super awkward with it, and then I think back to Ragnar, he'd be totally all on that. He is kind of like.
That's key, though. So let's talk about how Ragnar flirts, right? So in this case, she confronts him about something. I can't remember exactly what it was. Do you remember what it was, Wesley?
Isn't it to do with the archiving and how long they're taking?
Something like that, right? Yes. And he complains and he says that he actually fights back a little bit. He doesn't just sit there and take it like he has been for the rest of this time. And they sort of have a bit of an aggressive confrontation, and she uses her psychic powers and psycho powers and freezes him in place. And Ragnar finds out that her psycho powers specifically seem to revolve around this sort of combat ability. So she freezes him in place.
He's a Telekine, basically.
Yeah. She freezes him, and he, after a brief moment of what the hell is this, and struggling very, very hard, forces his way out of the paralysis and chokes her a little. And she seems to like this. Because she almost immediately warms to him and lets down her guard and starts telling him all loads of information about the Inquisitorial Order.
Yeah, that's a trope that dates back to like all of these old action serials that this book is very, very clearly based on. There is, the hard-ass woman who's a badass, but she's attracted to the protagonist.
It's very Indiana Jones. It's like amazingly Indiana Jones. He does this. He does the exact scene in Indiana Jones.
Yeah, but at the same time, this is Ragnar's penis. Technically, probably doesn't work.
he ain't getting anything like Indiana Jones did. I mean, I believe it's normal, but it won't.
Here's a weird thing that could easily change.
This.
Of course we are. That's the thing. Ragnar thinking with women reminds me of Master Chief having seen that bloody Halo TV show. Because Spartans and Space Marines have, I mean, you could say a Spartan is a Space Marine ripoff. They both have more or less the same features. They're genetically engineered superhumans with a bunch of organs implanted into them, which makes them stronger, faster, better than normal humans, but they're supposedly incapable of having sex. So, like the perfect soldier, they have no.
Also a great protagonist for a game that you're going to target to everybody, including kids. So it works pretty well in that regard. Except, as you said, like we find that Ragnar, because he's a space wolf, you see, and like space wolves have to have a bit of like, I don't know, something else about them, right? Yeah, exactly. And then you got to have the full character there, right?
I mean, part of me wonders if it isn't like PG. We can have Ragnar like doing all of those things Indiana Jones would do with a woman, because we know at the end of the day, Ragnar's never going to do anything because his dick doesn't work.
It's the perfect setup.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, they do clearly ensure.
Yeah, she should. She should know about Space Marines. She should know enough about Space Marines. Inquisitors aren't idiots.
Why would she? It's just weird. Why would she flirt with him if she knows that his penis doesn't work?
Well, because I'm sure his tongue does.
Well, also to be friend. Okay, you guys. Well, there's a more look. She's an Inquisitor. Inquisitors will use every tool at their disposal to get what they want. She's using her feminine wiles to make sure Ragnar is friendly and on her side. Okay.
Yes, which Ragnar points out multiple times, and she acknowledges that he realizes, mainly because he has a human lie detector in the form of his sense of smell, which means that he can basically read her mind throughout most of the discussions that they have. It's kind of weird and overpowered, and I'm going to say it again.
You're going to be saying this in every single Space Wolf story we talk about at least once. It's going to be the running gag. If we're doing a Space Wolf episode, when we do say Prospero Burns, everyone's going to come up with his take on how the supernatural sense of smell works in that book.
Ragnar's
I don't remember it. I don't remember it.
Maybe you will remember it when
as bad.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to move on from the Fang because it gets more interesting when they leave.
So they now know what their...
Yeah, go on.
They now know what their quest is. They must go and find the thing. They must find all three of the things to make the thing, to bring it to the pyramid to save the day.
Yeah, they don't know how they're going to save the day, but they know they have to do that.
So, to accompany the Inquisitor in his going to find all of the things, the Space Wolves decide to send a squad to basically keep him company, act as his muscle. And guess who it is?
And this, it's Ragnar and
if
friends.
It wasn't Ragnar, we would our adventure would end right there. Here's the
fascinating thing. I was going to say, the funny thing is that scene reminded me of the Fellowship scene. Like, so be it.
You have my
Fellowship. You have my axe.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, if Ragnar wasn't chosen to go, then we wouldn't know anything about what happened after that. It would literally be some Inquisitors visited the Fang and then left, and then moving on.
Cut to credits.
Yeah, basically.
This was set up nicely, though. This was set up nicely, though, because one, the Inquisitors already knew Ragnar and were familiar with him. It's like, sure, why not? We'll have him. Two, like Ragnar wanted someone to keep an eye on him, and hey, we've got Ragnar there. So basically, all according to Ranek's plans. Ranek's benevolent plans. Ranek's got a solid read. He's become a wolf priest for good reason.
So there's two things to mention just as they're leaving the Fang.
Okay.
One, I'm going to mention quickly. Ragnar, I'm pretty sure here, claims that the Emperor gave mankind the secret technology of the written word, which was quite a claim, I thought.
Yes, I suppose it is.
The second one is we have our first of 3, I believe, fart joke scenes.
Oh, I was waiting to mention this. The second they leave the Fang.
The second one.
The second they leave the Fang, it completely stops being a serious book and just goes completely crazy. We have a full page dedicated to fart jokes the second they get on that ship and leave.
This story becomes schlock in the best possible way once Chapter 4 happens. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with schlock. That's Saturday morning cartoons. That's exactly what this book is trying to be.
It's like they're on the ship leaving, and it's like it's a crossed vibe of like a military machismo type thing. It's like when they're heading out in a chopper at the start of Predator, and they're all like having their manly man talk as they head out, except it's fart jokes.
Yeah, well, Sven, who's now our new comic relief character in the story, he sort of says something over the comms, something like "silent but bloody deadly" or something like that, and everyone's like turns to look at him and they're like, "What?" And then everyone just like immediately smells it and starts trying to cover their faces. This is why you wear a helmet, Mr. Space Wolf.
Yes.
Oh shit. Okay, let me just read this out because I love it. The moment of weakness and loneliness passed, but replaced by a feeling of excitement about the approaching journey, he could see that his brothers from the Bloodclaw plaque shared both his excitement and his unease. He could taste both in the slightly metallic air. And then, what was it, a line? Oh, yeah, so he opens his eyes and sees everyone, and then he'd see Sven. Seated next to him was Sven, muttering, cursing to himself and grumbling about his hunger. His coarse features were twisted into a snarl, his stubby fingers locked together as if in prayer. He grunted and belched, then looked over at Ragnar and winked. Silent but bloody deadly, he muttered, and then Ragnar noticed he'd farted. The stink was awful for a moment in enclosed space. Such was the keenness of Ragnar's sense that he could distinguish the varying scents of what Sven had had for breakfast that morning. Fish gruel and black bread, Ragnar said without meaning to. Always a good base for a gas attack, Sven muttered cheerfully. A bright gleam entered his eyes. I love that. That is the moment that the story finally jumps the shark and just becomes glorious schlock.
Yes.
And the insane thing is that is only half, I think, of that scene. It goes on, they carry on joking about it.
You know what's even funnier? So that scene is basically the opening of Predator. I think you mentioned that earlier, didn't you?
Yes.
You know, they're in the chops coming in there.
Predator.
It's the moment where you get all the character stuff, because he's like, I think his name is Lars. He's like the one who's going to be Nils. He's the one who's going to become a wolf priest who's like all serious and like chides them both for making their fart jokes.
Well, he's like, I can't believe you're doing this, and then the sergeant Hakon is all like,
yeah, it's Hakon.
Yeah,
guys, cut it the fuck out.
Yeah, because like one of the fun other thing is like you see the characters here. So there's Nils and Lars, and I'm like, what are the chances one or both of them are going to be dead by the end of the story? Which of these members is the cannon fodder?
Well, maybe not both of them in this book, but you're getting there.
Well, they are both.
No,
in this book, aren't they?
They are both in this book.
Yeah.
Was it? I thought one was in this book, and then the other one was later on.
Sven and Styrbjörn survived, but survived this book. Lars and Niels don't. Was it Lars and Niels? Was it both of them in this book? Yes, it was. You're right.
Yes, they're both in this book.
Yep. So they leave. They do some magic ritual with a bit of the Triforce that they've got, and they are pointed.
Yeah, just remember, here's the fascinating thing. There's thing they do with the Triforce. Isana's naked for that one, like completely stark naked.
Oh yeah. He was setting up for the movie. That's what he was doing. But interestingly as well, this is the first time we see
it's like an Imperial ship as well. Oh yeah. It's his first time on a ship.
Yeah, so he goes from seeing their like little drop pod things to seeing this like tiny speck of metal in space, and then getting closer and closer and closer until it is like the largest single object he has ever seen. And I'm not talking about the ship. I'm talking about Commander Ghoul, because he is also described as being the largest person that he has ever seen.
We finally get to meet Commander Ghoul, the most obvious fucking. He is totally going to backstab you and scream a worm tongue.
So I didn't get this vibe because I wasn't expecting
it's
a crew member.
It's so weird that you didn't get that vibe because it was so obvious that it was like it could not have been more obvious if he outright told Ragnar, "I'm going to betray you."
I think I was tunnel visioning because I expected that it would be like inquisitorial shenanigans, not that the Inquisitors were going to be betrayed by their crew. I think I was tunnel visioning.
Isam definitely had some like questionable vibes around her because of like the fact that she was so easily doing all these rituals and stuff. But what threw me was that Commander Ghoul is described as being larger than the largest space marine that Ragnar knows, which is Hakon or whatever his name is. And Commander Ghoul is described as being larger than him. So I'm sitting here trying to understand what human is larger than a space marine. And not in any space marine, but larger than the largest space marine that he's seen. This seems
It's Darth Vader. Commander Ghoul is the Darth Vader of the story.
So that was what kind of threw me and made me think there's something weird about this guy but I don't think it's ever explained why he's so large. I don't think they ever explain why he's
Everything about
for a
him.
human.
Everything about him. His lips were thin and cruel. Black eyes dominated the gaunt, fanatical face. Black leather gauntlets gleamed on his hands. The man's left hand was no doubt left on some distant battlefield, replaced by a mechanical metal claw. The way it's written is a pulp novel. That's the way
He had a metal claw. He had a metal claw. I didn't realize that.
He is so obviously evil.
So I just, because I've read books from Inquisitors before, Inquisitors are often depicted in like somewhat evil ways. They often have like they're willing to work with, or they have like extreme elements to either their personality or their crew. So I just kind of wrote it off as that. But like thinking about it, given the nature of these books, I shouldn't have. Like I shouldn't have treated this as, yep, it's another Inquisitor story, because this is one of the first stories out there that has an Inquisitor in it. Isn't like like this is around the same time as
period, right?
This would have been around the same time as Ghostmaker, which had an Inquisitor at the end.
Yeah,
I think this is before Eisenhorn.
Well, Space Wolf was 1999. I don't know when this one came out.
Let me look this up. So we have got. I'm going to look up Ghostmaker, Ragnar's Claw, and I know Ghostmaker and Ragnar's Claw were both before before the second Eisenhorn book. Let me see. Eisenhorn release date. Xenos was May 2001, and I've got this here. Ghostmaker was 2000. Ragnar's Claw was 2000. So yeah, this is after. This is one of the second books they've got that has an Inquisitor, like in Black Library, not counting, I guess, Ian Watson novels before Black Library. Not counting those.
We could talk about that one.
We will talk about them, but I've not read them, and we're not talking about them.
I have first editions right behind my head.
Ooh. Okay. So, yeah,
so they get to the spaceship.
I wrote it off as being evil Inquisitor stuff, but yeah, whatever. We get to the spaceship, they do the seance, and they figure out.
So this is the first time we see a bunch of different things. So this is the first time that we're introduced to, in the same way we've got the Inquisitors now, which are like from outside the rest of the Imperium. We are getting lots of information and lots of weird aspects that the Spaceballs would never have seen before, and Ragnar certainly hasn't. So one, we have the seance going on, which is very strange. Two, we get an introduction to the brutality of the Imperium, and you start to see all these prisoners that are basically tied to, like, chained to benches because they're indentured servants on the ship. They're basically a prison ship. It's a prison ship floating through space. None of the crew can go anywhere because they're on a ship in space.
Yeah, like with that sort of stuff, you know what, I feel better now. With that sort of stuff going on, of course the guy is like in charge of like the security there's a hard ass, like cruel bastard.
Yeah.
He just fits in.
It's all down to the tropes. The thing is, I'm so used to the tropes of these kind of books.
I get you.
That I see what neither of you would probably see because you don't read as much as I do. I guarantee neither of you have ever read an L. Ron Hubbard book.
I have not.
No.
Okay, so...
Alright, so we get one of my favorite scenes.
Gun things. Oh, sorry, I think it's probably your scene, actually.
What's that, sorry?
The thing I was about to say, I'm pretty sure is what Oberyn was going to say. It's the scene where Sven's like, they do all right for themselves, the bloody Inquisitors, don't they? Commenting on how rich they are.
Oh, no, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite scenes in at least the first 2/3 of this book, which is that we get to see what happens when some sailors decide that they're going to try and pick a fight with some Space Marines.
Which would
that scene is so fascinating because, let's be blunt, the way 40k is today, that would never ever happen.
Normal mortals see Space Marines and fucking shit themselves.
There's probably a very good reason for that. I don't understand how this fight ever happens, right? Because these sailors. Sorry, go on.
Well, it felt like, wow, this would never happen today, but then at the end of it, we have an explanation. And the explanation is...
but is it a very good explanation? Because,
no.
Like... So, could you order... This is the question. Could you order a bunch of sailors to walk up to what must be giants in full ceramite armor who are just standing there, like, not giving a shit, and tell them to start a fist fight? this was insane. Like the I know they had a plan, right? So their plan was we'll distract the Space Marines and then we'll drop a crate of food cans on top of them, and this will definitely kill them because they don't wear helmets, of course. So this is ideal. We'll drop the crate of of food cans on top of them, and then we won't have to fight them. The problem is,
this begins a running feature of this book, which is undignified things happening to Space Marines.
That's fair. The problem is the Space Marines see the crate coming, they dodge the crate, and then instead of going, okay, the plan failed, we should get out of here, the entire crew that is there decides, oh yeah, well I've got a crowbar, and you have like a tire wrench, and you have this stick thing. Let's try and melee the Space Marines. This is definitely not going to go badly. And what was the casualty count at the end, wasn't he?
Something like 15 of them, wasn't it?
Actually,
4 of them were dead, and like
2 men. No, 2 men dead, 14 men hospital.
Oh, I was close.
Okay.
It's actually really low when you think about it, and that's because deliberately, it's even mentioned here, I think, Ragnar mentions he deliberately doesn't try to kill anyone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because he already suspects that this was intentional to have them, to have a reason to confine them to their prison-like quarters.
Yes.
They're luxurious, but prison-like quarters.
So, then they arrive at the...
you didn't mention the way, and this is fascinating, the way Kara-Isan's reading functions is very much based on World War II era ideas of the occult, like the woman who was imprisoned on ancient witchcraft trials for holding a seance where the people within talked to the supposedly dead members of a warship that was they did the battleship Barham when it sank.
Okay.
She apparently held a seance, but the way it's described is her opening her mouth and then out of it comes this ectoplasm that then forms a shape and then says, "Come here and you will all die, every last one of you."
It's worth noting that the shape that it forms is a giant orc head.
Yes. So their vision is, here's the planet where it's kept as a relic by it's being attacked by orcs. Oh no.
Which, of course, is the excuse. Now is the time to introduce the orcs.
Yes.
One of the biggest and most common opponents you will ever see in 40k anywhere.
It's always time to introduce the orcs, to be honest. And this was as good as any time to introduce them.
The orcs is probably the best part of this thing, is the time they spend with the orcs. I think it's the most fun.
God, yeah. Because, absolutely.
Good Lord, that's him. That's William King just indulging in every single like fun action movie thing that he can possibly think of.
So they arrive there. I think they decide they have to teleport in, right?
Yeah, they have to teleport in.
Teleport in.
We get a really good detailed description of 2 things here that we won't have seen before, and that
is one of them as I said, jungle.
No.
Because I actually wanted to comment.
Ragnar hasn't seen a jungle before, which is good. Yeah.
I actually thought the way the environment was flavored, like it's full of insects. It's a humid jungle. People are getting fevers. A space full of physiologists. I thought that was quite nice. Though he goes into very
definitely.
nice detail on the environment. You really feel how desolate the Space Hulk is later as well.
I now need to go back one step. Did they mention that Space Wolves hate teleporting above all else? So that's a big feature of Space Wolf lore later on.
Oh,
Ragnar doesn't say that. No, he doesn't say that. And Ragnar earlier on, when they arrive at the ship, he mentions that the ship supposedly has a mythical teleporter. And it's obvious when he says that it's going to become relevant later on, and it does, because they use it to get to the planet. But
yeah, so that's a big plot point that's this is retcon. Space Wolves never use teleporters, and that must have happened in a book after this one, because this is one of the cases where the canon clearly doesn't line up.
Okay, I didn't know that. The one thing I've noticed Ragnar has a big hang-up about is confined spaces. Whenever he's in a confined space, he's like, I'm freaking out, man. Oh, I got to get through it.
That kind of makes sense if you consider their lifestyle before. They just spend a lot of time outdoors. They just spend a lot of time on the open ocean, lots of massive spaces. If anything, they're not going to be agoraphobic or anything, are they? So, so the detailed things that once again, I mentioned this before, but if this is an introduction to the 40k world, then he's giving us plenty of detail on on the things that seem very new, which, yes, as you said, warp travel. We get to see from Ragnar's perspective, who doesn't know anything about it either, just how strange warp travel is in the 40k world.
We get a very,
and this is possibly one of the.
We just get the jump in and the jump out, don't we? We aren't.
Yes.
We don't sit here with them on the journey. We don't have like shenanigans on the journey like that. Like we have like, a little bit.
So we see the beginning where like the guy is telling Ragnar to use the crash couch or whatever it is, the acceleration chair. And like a bit of a description of why, and like the fear in the sailor's eyes, and Ragnar knows that this guy has already seen like 1,000 jumps, but he's still scared of them. And Ragnar's like, oh god, this is going to be weird then. And then you get to see the initial jump, and then you see the aftermath where Ragnar's talking about how there's like dents in the steel, like the size of a truck, and he's just like, what the hell what caused that? Which is interesting.
It's a good example of selling warp travel. Well, yeah, it's always inconsistent.
What was the second thing you were going to say they detailed? Is it teleporting?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the teleportation, but he doesn't go quite so detailed about the teleportation. It's more like this is a thing, this is how it works. It's a very weird sensation, and then there wasn't a huge amount of detail on that, but yeah,
it's still a little bit, yeah.
So he does mention here as well. He mentions war dogs from Fenris, which is another suggestion that there are actually wolves on Fenris.
So
that's really another thing we have to worry about.
Yeah, I'm very interested to discuss the wolves on Fenris in the future. So they get on the orc planet, they teleport down there, they have a time of it in the jungles, approaching the orc area. They approach, they watch some orcs for a bit.
We get to see the orcs for the first time, and they're like.
It describes the way it describes them is very like old school orcs. It even describes like the little hats, the hats with the two horns, the old little barbarian horns.
But here's the funny thing: the orcs actually can speak a lot more than they usually do. But what's interesting is talking about the orc, his skull was ape-like, the bestial yellowish eyes set in deep cavernous sockets. The whole impression was of ape-like power and savagery.
Well, which
is a very old school pulp way of describing it, which I would say is adjacent to certain stereotypes that we use. It's the comparison of them to apes was quite a common feature of pulp fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're trying
we
to
don't
make
get
them
just
look
the
barbaric.
Both fantasy and sci-fi for that matter. Yeah,
I'm gonna say in some settings. You might have more uncharitable things going on when a barbaric tribe is described like that. I'm thinking of maybe something like the Conan ones. But these are orcs, so they get a pass.
That's why I see adjacent.
Yeah.
So the thing here as well is I haven't really read a huge amount about orcs. They don't turn up. So they do turn up in Horus Heresy, but they don't turn up very often, surprisingly. They're usually talked about in a historical context because...
Yeah,
well, that's the whole point. They are basically a historical context at that point.
Yeah, so it's interesting here because this is another novel now with orcs in it, but also we are immediately not just introduced to the orcs, but we also get to see the Gretchens, right?
I was going to say, he makes a really clear distinction between the orcs and the Gretchens. He makes sure you know which is which.
Again, that's selling the thing. It's very well done how it's handled. How this is an introduction to the orcs. This is an orc. This is a Gretchen. It's a lot easier to sell it to someone if you can describe it nicely like this, or a video game. That's the way you sell the universe.
Yeah.
It is worth noting, though, that it is also in reverse a lot easier to describe a character that you already know exists. So if someone tells you there is this race in our world, it is the orcs and the Gretchens and various other orc-like things and ships and aeroplanes that they use and stuff like that. If somebody hands you all of this pre-built lore and goes, write a story about this, then you're going to throw them in because why not? You have all these things that you can just introduce to your story.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
way the story is structured is designed to... Yeah.
So, do you want to describe what happens next, Jim?
Oh, yes, I get to go what happens next. So, actually, they're in this a jungle.
Well,
and it's like
ziggurat,
basically Central America.
Is this the bit
Space Central America.
Can I just check? Is this the bit I think it's going to be, or is this first, or did they first find the guy who was praying for someone to save?
Oh, no, they found the guy first. They did find the guy first, then they infiltrated the next night.
They find this guy. they're debating whether or not to save him, and then he starts praying out loud for the Emperor to save him. So Ragnar goes, well, okay, and pops out and fucking blasts these orcs and saves the guy.
And it's kind of wonderful how for him, his faith in the Emperor meant the Space Wolves saved him. I mean, that would seem like a miracle, wouldn't it?
Yep.
And then the guy passes out.
Yeah.
I like
this
the
guy, and they are then rewarded.
He's a member of the Order of Perpetual Bliss.
That you know what? That's very suspicious now that you mention it.
Yes,
because that is.
I thought that
sounds like a Slaneshi cult.
Yes, nowadays you would not name an imperial sect that these days. That is how you would name a Slanesh cult, or possibly a Slanesh cult posing as imperials.
Impersonating.
Yes. Yes, that is.
That's another example of the archaic ways of this. This book is a throwback to second edition 40k.
Even just the way things, even just the naming conventions. Like we had Maddox's last book, which is not 1,000 Suns name these days. And as I've got to have
the guy we just had was literally the guy we just had was Brother Tethys. The Tethys was an ancient sea that separated Africa from Europe in the time of the dinosaurs.
Well, in this, he's a device that helps them find where the next piece of the Triforce
is. He is. He's a plot MacGuffin. He's a walking MacGuffin in the story.
Mm-hmm.
He is. So I have to interject right here, because this is the only mention of them ever wearing helmets in all 3 books. He's right here.
Is it?
There is a mention here of I can't remember what it was, but somebody has a helmet on. One of the Space Wolves. And this is the only time that I could find where they actually talk about having helmets. The rest of the time, it's almost explicitly said that they're not, because Ragnar gets blood on their face, and he has a second in translucent eyelid that he just sort of
There is a mention of it in the 3rd book. Bad. I'll cover that next one. But there is.
I must have missed that one.
Yeah, I'm surprised you missed it. But yeah,
it's kind of crazy that they never wear helmets.
So
they're mortal enemies.
Space Wolves is if they wear a helmet, it cuts off their sense of smell, so they lose that superpower you mentioned. So Space Wolves hate
a really good point.
Using helmets. They absolutely this is in universe. It's mentioned in several other books. You probably have got to it eventually, but they mention multiple times they hate wearing helmets because they feel like they've cut off some of their senses. They when they can't smell things, it fucking panics the Space Marines. Wasn't it even in Grey Hunter?
Yes, it is mentioned in Grey Hunter.
Yeah. So I knew I remember this.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is they get this guy, and then he leads them to a place where they need to go. Jimbus,
they must recover the. So they must recover the Talisman of Lycos. Now, one of the orcs presumably has it, their chieftain. So they need to infiltrate this place. They need to find the orc who has it, and they need to recover it from him.
And then they
creep their way.
So it's a stealth mission.
So they creep their way. They make rafts and sail down the river. I love it.
They mention.
This Indiana Jones, they make rafts.
Oh,
they
raft absolutely. That's definitely the Indiana Jones scene. But what I was saying earlier about the named things that they have, so the vehicles and stuff of the orcs, they mentioned Gargants here, which I assume is that like an orc titan?
It is orc titans, heavy orc titans.
Okay, because they're mentioned here, and at some point I think they say something like, "This is the guy that slew 3 Gargants on his own," or something. I'm just like, wait, there's a space wolf that slew 3 orc titans. Yeah.
Oh, here's a fun thing. As they're sailing down the river, we get a scene that, to me, reminds me of a scene from Space Wolf. It's when they're sailing down the river and a bunch of giant river monsters attack them. And it's just like that scene with the snake from Space Wolf, except now Ragnar is a Space Wolf himself, so he's doing what the guy was doing.
Except he doesn't use his gun, because it doesn't work. They try shooting
what do you mean?
The shooting doesn't work.
Yeah. It's too dumb to die, Nils shouted above the bolter blast. Just like you then, Sven snapped back.
Yeah, so that is an example. Banter. That is an example of a joke that is repeated about 50 times over the course of this and the next book, because every conversation with Sven in it is just that same joke recycled over and over again.
Well, no, normally Sven's the one who's too dumb to die.
Well, yes, okay, that's a good point. So in this bit, the king is actually setting up the conversation between him and, is it Nils? because Nils is going to die later on. And then Sven has to feel bad. But after that point, it's all between him and Ragnar.
Yeah. So they go down the river.
Yes, the river, and then the crocodiles. So he's still wearing a helmet in this, by the way, because he goes under the water, and it mentions the fact that he's using the rebreather when he's underwater.
Oh, okay.
So I assume he must have a helmet on.
I'd forgotten that bit. Yeah, okay.
But then it'll go, because the helmet won't be in the next scene.
Oh no. So what happens next, Jimbus?
Yes. This is your moment.
So they infiltrate this ruined city where they're constructing Gargants. It's mentioned that there's Gargants there. And they have to infiltrate their way, so they're crawling slowly towards the orc camp through, I think it was a riverbed or something? Was that a riverbed?
Well, they'd come from the river, and they were crawling up through the scrubbery.
Yeah. So he's slowly crawling his way through, and he's hearing the orcs having like a big ass party in their camp. There's like drinking and shooting, and it's like all raucous. And he's out there crawling his way forwards.
I want to say something there.
Yeah, that's very mad. Yeah, speak.
The shooting, they're worried that from the shooting that there's some sort of fighting going on, and then they realise, oh, that's just what orcs do when they celebrate.
Yeah, they just shoot up into the air for no fucking reason. Yeah,
he isn't always. You know what? That's a good example of what I was saying before, because this is all expressed to us through Ragnar's internal monologue. Ragnar tells us this, but he's telling us what is being shown. He doesn't tell us the orcs are shooting in the air because they are celebrating. He says there's gunshots, and then he says Ragnar sees another orc shooting in the air. And then Ragnar talks and rationalizes it and realizes it. It's a weird, he shows us by having Ragnar tell us rather than just telling us.
Well Ragnar is always there. Ragnar is always there providing the context. He does that through the entire book series.
Well, he is our viewpoint character. Yeah. He is our avatar, our window onto the setting.
Yeah, I just remembered that as a really distinct example to me of that thing.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Sorry, go on, Jimbus.
Carry on.
He was slowly crawling his way up, and then he there's I think there's a truck right in front of them. It pulls over, an orc sort of burps, jumps off it, walks over towards Ragnar, who freezes, hiding himself, thinking is this orc going to find me? And then the orc stopped right in front of him. It seemed impossible to Ragnar that could not see him. He heard buttons pop and the sound of water flowing. Orc urine splashed his armor. The orc now satisfied grunt, and then the stink was so bad that Ragnar flinched. A slight motion must have drawn the orc's attention, for it looked down at where he crouched. Its eyes went wide and it opened its mouth to bellow a warning. I just love the fact that the orc spots him because it farts so bad that it spooks Ragnar.
And then Ragnar kills that orc. He kills the next orc as well, doesn't he?
He kills the orcs, and then the boys get up and oh, we can commandeer this buggy and use it to drive through the city disguised as orc to go and find the guy with the telephone light.
Best idea ever.
The bloody Mad Max scene. When I was reading it, I was reminded of Fury Road. It was literally Fury Road has been compared to Gorka Morka, which is clearly what this is inspired by.
Yeah.
This scene is from second edition. It's a Gorka Morka game with space wolves instead of one of the orc gangs.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It describes them how, people are shooting each other. People are after us. Oh wait, no, they're just trying to race us. And it describes their fucking race against them, and the sort of destruction derby that sort of ensues for all the other.
Well,
they cause a traffic jam.
It is silly, but it is so fun, and it is something you will never see in a 40k book written today.
It's fucking amazing. You can tell. I feel like you can tell from this the king absolutely loves the orcs, because the second the orcs appear in this novel, he just he grabs the dial that was set to 7 or 8, and he just rams it up to 15.
The orcs have always been best when they're not taken seriously at all. They're silly. They're fun.
I will say
they're the war boys.
I can think of 1 or 2 modern 40k books that are from an orc perspective that do have some very silly things coming up. They might be worth exploring at some point. I'm not sure.
There's also a wonderful graphic novel we might talk about in the future.
I think we are going to.
Because, there's so many wonderful, fun, silly things in that one.
So possibly my favorite line in this entire book is read by Ragnar during this chase. It's just, it truly encompasses Ragnar's like naivety when it comes to the universe, and also like the very strange nature of the books that King writes. As you said, they're like that. Nobody will ever take the Space Marines as flippantly, kind of as King does. And the line is, "He was a Space Marine. For such beings, events like these were everyday occurrences," thought Ragnar.
After this whole action movie scene, which has lines of dialogue that are like lifted from a Fast and the Furious movie. Which way? He asked Kara-san. Keep going the way you're going, she told him. I'll tell you when to turn. The move through the night had seemed more like a war.
So yeah, he's just been pissed on by an orc, and then they have a drag race through the city that causes a pileup that like basically covers like half the city of just orc vehicles like smashed into each other on fire. Like some orc gets run over like 3 times and still gets up.
Just another day in the life of being a Space Marine.
This is his only like expedition off the planet, and now he thinks that all Space Marine life is like this. It's just incredible.
It is amazing. Again, it's
almost like King
morning
threw that in on
cartoon.
purpose. It's such a blatant like
it's
like,
just it's
point
so
in itself.
It's literally like a good bear movie. Reading this sort of thing kind of reminds me of like really fun dumb action sequences in something like, say, Action USA.
Oh, it is good.
It's amazing.
And then the action scene.
Sadly, the book is never going to get this good again, but it's still got plenty of fun stuff coming up.
Yeah. So after the drag racing scene, they get to the I think they end up infiltrating the orc leaders thing. Is it like the governor's palace or something he's taken over? Something like that.
Yeah,
I think
like
so.
that.
Yeah.
So they infiltrate this, and we get something weird, which is that the orc leader is also a psyker, which is like, that's a bit off kilter to current orc lore.
So he's both a
is.
psyker and a gigantic muscular war boss.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the fact that he's weird, because I think the insinuation is he's basically been corrupted by chaos because he's different to normal orcs. He speaks like, "Home, greetings mortals, I am Gerd, speaker for 2 gods. It good you brought Eye of Gork to me, it goes well with Eye of Mork."
Yeah,
So the insinuation later on...
Two gods is just Gork and Mork. Easy.
Yeah, but the insinuation later on is that the talisman was providing a huge amount of his psychic power. He was already a psyker, which is interesting because he's also built like a war boss. But
yes,
it was an interesting orc to say the least. He's also like one-on-one duels with Ragnar and completely dominates him. Like not only in strength, but in
the psychic shit as well. Yeah.
Well, he's speed. It's like speed and skill. Like Ragnar just gets destroyed by this orc.
War bosses are a big deal. An orc war boss is nothing to fuck with.
He's not labelled as a war boss. He's labelled as a warlord, which is the next step up beyond a war boss.
Oh shit.
Oh, okay. Fair. Yeah, like that is more than a match for the average Space Marine.
But I didn't buy Russ. Are you a troll? It's literally what Ragnar says.
I also loved how they were incredibly stealthy. They pulled out all the stops to sneak all the way through this building, and then they arrive at the warlord's chamber, and they just walk through the front door.
And then he's like, just as planned.
Yes, exactly. It's like, what?
An action movie. That's exactly what happens in an action movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of funny. And then you have the get to the chopper scene on the roof.
Yep.
They kill the war boss, get the thing, the Talisman of Lycos, the bit of the Triforce.
And then they get teleported out of there.
Just in time. It reminded me of Half-Life 2, actually. That they're just coming in and they just teleport out at the last second.
That happens in so many things. That's such a trope at this point.
Yeah, although not quite in time, because Ragnar ends up like dangerously wounded. Yeah,
he gets hit by another bolter or something. I say another one. He gets almost. It seems like he's similarly damaged as he is in the prologue for the first book.
Oh yeah, and then when he wakes up from his coma and he sees Kara-san, he's reminded of something he had not felt since Anna had been lost.
So begins their definite cementing heroes of love interest.
The love interest for an asexual space marine.
So, after this, where are we taken next? Is that straight to the Space Hulk?
Space Hulk, Space Hulk, Space Hulk. Like the first of many Space Hulks.
Yes, Space Hulk. And so now we get the next tour through like the greatest hits of 40k, because Space Hulk was like a major game for Games Workshop in its very early days.
Yep.
And this whole scene is lifted from Space Hulk.
I really liked this scene. All of that aside, I really liked their time on the Space Hulk. I liked the description of the Space Hulk. Like, again, really nice flavoring of the environment. They've got like these huge drops descending into the darkness. There's this desolate vibe. And the
way he's described.
Do you know what a Space Hulk is? It's like a space version of the Mines of Moria.
Well, so you say that. I was just about to say, it's amazing the way he describes, like, as they're going down. You almost have, like, geological levels of ships. Like, he's describing as they're going down one of the tunnels that, like, you can see where the ship layers were, like, packed together. It was actually a really, really amazing description.
A lot of Space Hulks are described like that, and I thought this was a particularly good one. Because that is what they are. They are a bunch of ships mashed together. You know what? It's less like it's like the Mines of Moria meets an Escher painting, because you walk along and then suddenly you're like standing on the ceiling of another ship's corridor.
Yeah, and the gravity's all screwed up and all over the place. It was that was a really interesting bit. I had a question though. So obviously, as you said, they have to meet the next greatest hit. So there has to be what is always on Space Hulks. There has to be Gene Stealers.
Yep.
Before that, we also get another interesting thing, which is when they find the thing, the talisman of whatever is part of the thing, there is a statue of an Eldar, and then we get Ragnar monologuing in his head for a few minutes about like greatest hits of what the Imperium think the Eldar are, a decadent, sinister race who performed arcane rituals for their own unguessable purposes, and who interfered in the wars of mankind for no discernible purpose.
Yeah, he starts reading his Pokedex entry again for Eldar, and then
yes.
But like,
and then
I really like the description of the Tyranids.
Yes, another good one. It is another good one. Although it's kind of interesting, like we get the Gene Stealers. So I think the question I had was, we have the Gene Stealers here in the Space Hulk.
Very
obviously they had to be there.
Space Hulk, Gene Stealers.
Yes,
because that's how they get
Is
about.
Is that the thing that if you have a Space Hulk, will you always have Gene Stealers?
No, but that is how that basically Gene Stealers getting on Space Hulks is like Gene Stealers can operate independently. Like if Tyranids are doing something with a Space Hulk, it is putting Gene Stealers on it, because Gene Stealers can then use that Space Hulk. It'll show up somewhere else, and they can go and from there infest somewhere. That's the idea.
I mean, you know what? That whole trope, Gene Stealers and Space Hulk, is literally ripped off from Alien. The original Aliens, Alien. Space Hulk is Nostromo. Gene Stealers are literally Xenomorph ripoffs. Always have been.
Yep.
It does make sense.
And the way they work in the setting, though, is, which I think was Obrum's question, is basically Gene Stealers use Space Hulks to get about, because they can show up in weird places in the galaxy. Like they can take travel routes that the Tyranids might not otherwise go, and they will then infect.
You know what the funny thing? So first, Ragnar smells evil. This is an evil place. Your nose tells you that. My nose and my spirit and my common sense. Yes. And then as they're going through, they hear a scuttling sound, and Sven, wonder if it's edible. I hate bloody food tablets. Talking about eating whatever it is. More humor.
You say that, and then we get another amazing line, which I like. Not knowing what is real and what isn't inside this, like the lore of this world, was really confusing to me, because he says something like, "They realize it's cockroaches," and Ragnar pulls up this piece of information about cockroaches from his Pokedex, and it says the ancients used to carry them around on these ships to eat flakes of dead skin from their bodies. And I was like,
what a shit life that would be. I'm eating the skins that these cockroaches shed to survive.
No, not that way. The other way around.
Oh.
The other way around. So it's like the ancients used to carry them around to eat the flakes of dead skin that their bodies shed. You're talking about the ancients.
So that makes so much more sense now. Oh my god. But
I was...
What? Okay,
I was so confused because, like, who is he talking about? He often mentions ancients, and they're talking about ancient humans as well. But like, I thought, are they introducing something new here? Like, who the hell? Like,
You know, the really fun bit is directly after he talks about the fat mutated cockroach. Sven, thank you, O Sage One. I knew that. The Tutelary engines put the same knowledge in my head as they did in yours. Yes, but you need a brain to be able to use that knowledge. It just echoes around the empty space inside your skull. So, Ragnar insulting Sven for that misunderstanding of cockroaches.
yeah, and that will be repeated another 100 times.
Going
That
back,
joke.
William King
joke.
loves his tropes.
Going back to the Gene Stealer thing, there was a reason I was going into this detail on it, which is that is what Tyranids do. What Tyranids typically do not do with Space Hulks is slap termagants and synapse creatures in them and actually use them as a hub for breeding and creating new things. Which made...
Because we actually get Tyranids, don't we?
Yes.
Like in this place.
Like, we had proper Tyranids, not just Gene Stealers, which is unusual.
Yeah, which is, again, they're trying to sell the Tyranids. You can't realistically sell the Tyranids as just the Gene Stealers.
Yeah,
they want to show all the stuff.
But also, this is older. This is 20 years old. You wouldn't have this now, because now you wouldn't slap termagants and things in a Space Hulk typically, would you? But
it's worth noting they don't have flesh borers, at least.
Don't they? I thought it described them as having some sort of living ammunition that was tearing apart the crew members who weren't in power armor.
I thought Ragnar describes it as being like a bioacid that like melts through one of his, or tries to start melting through one of his gauntlets.
I think there was both.
Oh, okay, there might have been both. I'm not sure.
The interesting thing is,
go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, one, this is unusual, but two, the whole thing that was going on there was like weird and twisted because of the talisman, it turned out, and I kind of liked what they were doing.
The whole thing is going on there is literally, it's the scene from Alien or Aliens. I mean, there's a way it describes all of the eggs being around,
yes.
And then at the center of it, this fleshy mass that is breeding them, which the third and final part of the crystal is like inside it.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that I want to ask that lead to questions here, right? So one,
you know what?
At some point they use syntheflesh to heal something.
Oh yeah.
Is that a thing in the rest of the lore as well?
Not really so much now. Yeah. There's not so much flesh in a can now as there was in these books. I think.
Yeah, it's been scaled back a lot. It's nowhere near as effective as it used to be.
So the second one was. Sorry, go on, carry on.
I was going to say it's basically back to gel from Star Wars, but that's not important.
So they also do something else a lot in these books that you don't see, which is they seem to heal their armor. They like fill it in with like concrete.
Yes, they have like the little armor repair putty, like expanding foam or whatever.
Yeah, which I quite liked. But also in the scene, so we see Ghoul, the great Commander Ghoul. We see him wrestling a Gene Stealer.
What a fucking guy!
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, he is totally going to betray them.
I have like an image of him as being like some sort of like Ibram Gaunt type character. Not like Ibram Gaunt. What the fuck am I saying? The other commissar, the one that's Nemesis of the Orcs.
I know who you mean.
Hero of Hades
I don't remember his name either.
How am I forgetting his? Oh my god.
It doesn't matter. We'll remember it some other time. Like, come on, this is space. This is Ragnar's claw we're trying to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was going to say he puts me in the mind of what's his name and his metal claw. You know who I mean.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I know who you mean. Yeah.
Worst.
So he makes. So there's something else that I wasn't quite sure of here, and like maybe you guys will remember, but I'm fairly sure that this is actually the second Space Hulk. Yarrick, did you say?
Yeah. Second Space Hulk.
I'm pretty sure this is the second Space Hulk that they mention in the story, and it won't be the last either. So the first one, I'm pretty sure the reason that the orcs on the planet are like rebelling, not rebelling, but like are suddenly armed much better, and they're like going crazy. So supposedly there's always been orcs in the forest, and then suddenly they're like much better armed. There's like 3 times as many of them, or 10 times as many of them.
Space Hulk arrived and brought like most of the orc with it.
I mean,
so one Space Hulk.
Yeah.
This is the first Space Hulk, right?
Yep.
And then there's the second one now, which they're on with Tyranids.
So Space Hulks are notorious for 2 things: 1, having orcs, and 2, having Gene Stealers. So we've got both.
At this point, though, it just seems like whenever King needs something to...
I was going to say, King could have fused the two if he wanted to. He could have had a base Hulk with orcs fighting Tyranids, and then Ragnar and the gang have to fight both to get the talisman.
But it's better to show them one at a time for your product release.
Yeah, because you need to give them a bit more room for your... Yeah.
I'm 100% on board with your angle here. Right.
I think I agree as well. I mean, I've got a question that
we get to see how Tyranids work with synapse creatures. They even show they take out the synapse creature and all the others start panicking.
Yes. So this may be a question that is this question may be very tangential, and stop me if you think this is good to go on forever. But what is the so obviously gene stealers can like infiltrate human societies and breed, and then you end up with like human cross Tyranid hybrids or whatever. Yeah. What happens with orcs?
Orcs just show up, and if there were orcs before, they're going to join them. Orcs just use them to get around.
Sorry, I mean gene stealers and orcs.
Oh, gene stealers can infiltrate all sorts of species, not just humans.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, but you don't ever really hear about. I've never seen, at least.
You will at some
orc
point.
Gene stealers, because that sounds absolutely horrifying.
There are stories with orc gene stealers.
Oh no! Oh no!
And we'll leave it at that.
All right.
So they managed to kill the giant creature and recover the final piece of the talisman. Now they must get to Arius and complete their quest.
Yes. So they get to planet with no significance other than in this story. They go to the pyramid, and the pyramid is described like some sort of Necron construct, except it's not. They go inside, and they have like Eldar ghosts show up.
Yes. And they are super important, right? Because these Eldar ghosts basically destroy the entire plot if anyone listens to them at all and pays attention to what they say.
It's very important for the plot that they just ignore these fucking ghosts. He listens to Eldar.
Completely. I mean, right, so what do the Eldar say? The Eldar say something basically along the lines of, there is something trapped in this that is leaking out. Don't release it. The thing you have is the key to release it. Now, if you're paying attention to anything that is happening right now, you'll be like, okay, so this curse started recently, and they just said that this thing started to leak out recently. Maybe the curse or disease or whatever is on this planet is being caused by the thing that is slowly leaking out. And instead of this, they just go, yeah, we should probably release whatever it is. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll fix the problem.
No, we need to use the key to fix it.
On the one hand, that's tying into an old trend in 40k, which is the Eldar being the Cassandras of the setting. And then they'll tell the humans what they shouldn't do, and then the humans do it anyway, because humans are stupid.
That definitely fits perfectly into that trope.
But also, humans just generally not trusting anybody.
The exact same. That trope is so common. I mean, it's literally a plot point in the first Dawn of War game. That's how normie it is at this point.
Yeah, it's very... Humans don't
like
listening to Eldar.
It's like on the bedrocks of 40k. Even when the Eldar are right.
Never
especially
trust
when
the
Eldar are right.
It just seemed kind of silly. Because like that Eldar basically...
It is silly. I mean, good grief, it's a plot point of Dawn of War. The first Dawn of War.
There is another aspect to this too, though. Is that the Eldar speaks somewhat cryptically anyway, and there is no reason for him to. If he had just been like, yo guys,
because he's an Eldar.
Right?
Easy. That's what they do.
Their own fault. What you're saying is there's two tropes. One is that the Eldar on purpose make themselves hard to understand, and the second one is that the humans on purpose ignore everything the Eldar says.
I think the Eldar can't help themselves. I don't think the humans can help themselves either. It's just the way it is.
What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
So we go into the pyramid.
They go into the pyramid, and the pyramid's like there's all of this. They go like deep into it. It's a bit like Ghostbusters. There's a rumbling. There's ooze everywhere, an overwhelming sense of evil, and then there's a deep laugh and literally a line straight out of a pulp thing or like Saturday morning cartoon. Greetings, fools. In the name of beloved Uncle Nurgle, I, Botchalax, favoured spawn of the most disgusting Lord of Disease, bid you welcome. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for freeing me.
And then we have like 5 pages of exposition back and forth between him and the Space Wolves.
And him and the Sternberg, like, Emperor, save us, an unclean one.
Yeah, it's just them talking to each other.
Oh
to
no,
explain the plot.
it's amazing because it's amazing. Like, demonic scum prepare to die. Please be a little quieter. Can't you see I'm not well? You humans can be so tiring, almost as bad as those Eldar pests who trapped me here. Well,
He makes
it's
that
been a
joke 3
boring
times
few
as well.
thousand years, but oddly restful too. So I suppose I mustn't grumble. But now I have things to do. A plague demon's work is never done, you know.
He
Just
makes
the
that
way he's
joke.
so jovial and just wonderful. Like, what was that wonderful line? I think later, which is probably one of my favorite ones, was that time he was talking about, "Ah, yes, foolish boy, you can't slay me. I am a demon prince of Nurgle." Despite earlier calling himself a great unclaimed one, he jumps back and forth.
Yes.
You might, if you are very powerful and lucky, be able to destroy this living vessel and return my essence to the warp, but you could not kill me. Not even your emperor could do that. Believe me, I know. I met him once. A nice enough chap, but very dour.
And then Ragnar believes him. He's like, yeah, I'm sure he did.
So, I actually wanted to say, I hate the trope that comes up a lot in 40. I hate whenever in a 40k book, 2 people stand and monologue at each other in what would otherwise probably realistically be an action scene. God, I don't like it. And they absolutely just sit there and yell at each other for ages. But aside from that, I actually really like how Nurgle is characterized here, and also like how the characterization of it is rationalized. Like, quite often,
He just doesn't give a shit.
Yes, but often Nurgle often doesn't give a shit. But here, like, you get to see it rationalized by Ragnar and understand. And it puts lines out like describing about how, because of how mirthful they are, it causes despair because they can see that it's mirthful. He recognizes that it's mirthful because of its inevitable victory, and this is helping create despair in others. There's things like that.
He talks about like the psychological aspect, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I love that.
So King goes absolutely ballistic with the description in this scene, because following this, they have like the fight scene, and then they have like the action scene where they're running away, and then they're running back, and then the zombies. We'll get to the zombies. The entire description of the scene, though, I picked up my favorite line, which was, it was like the roaring of a sea of phlegm. And I was just like, what does that mean? but okay, let's go with that.
You know, you're all forgetting the very, very important part. When the Demon Prince goes, "Oh, that reminds me, Dagul, it's time for your reward. Thank you, Master." Dun dun dun.
and then like,
nothing happens. It means nothing.
Not immediately, but yeah. And I read that and I was like, oh yeah, he exists. Oh.
Worth noting, Ragnar there just immediately shoots him in the back.
Yes, but then
I just love the fact that your reaction was basically your reaction to that whole plot line from Necropolis with the guy who murdered the people. No, he exists.
No, that was your reaction to him. My reaction was like, come on, what are you going to do with him? And then it was like, he didn't forget about him. That was me, because I was enjoying that one building up. Whereas this guy, he just actually like felt like he just wasn't important. They weren't even trying to. It didn't feel like they were trying to set anything up with him. He was just there sometimes. That's how I felt with this guy. He was just there. It didn't feel like they were trying to set something up, as opposed to the guy in Necropolis, where they were trying to set something up, and I was enjoying that journey, and then they forgot about him for half a book.
I mean, I agree though with both of you, because I think you're absolutely right, wasn't he? He barely turns up at all. He's there occasionally, but it's also kind of irrelevant when he's there, and he doesn't really do much. He's just this giant unknown like figure, literally. And I also agree with you, Jim, is that he seems like an obvious bad guy. But then again, wasn't he right? Like, the Inquisitors always work with evil people, so it's kind of like, what the hell's going on with this guy? He's definitely strange. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Anyway, zombies. There's literal zombies.
There's a lot of different aspects to Nurgle in here. You get to see like the people who are hard to put down. You get people who are like just surrounded by mucousy demons that just encase them and melt them down or something. There's like some horrific things happen here.
Yeah. This is where Nils dies, or whatever the other one that survived.
I think Lars dies here. I think Nils died to the orc, and Lars dies here.
One of them died to the orc, and then this one was the other one. Who just gets encased, as you said, like encased in like a mucus shell or whatever it is.
So they run away. And Carla goes, "I know how we can do this," and then they go back and save the day.
I do like how as Gul starts to like dissolve, Botchelek's like, there we go. One good turn deserves another, that sort of thing.
And he throws up on him.
Yep. Yes, beautiful.
So, quick question for you guys. When does King start referring to Inquisitor Isan as Kara?
Oh, that's a good point.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't notice that. Did you notice a turning point or something?
Yeah, it's when she's at his bedside.
It is unsurprising.
Oh, that's lovely. Good spot.
Yeah, and from that point on in the book, she's known as Kara in like almost all the scenes. I'm pretty sure in all the scenes that I remember, it just refers to as Kara.
Well then.
Again, it is such a wonderfully, like, you would never see it sort of thing in a modern 40k story. You'd never see an Inquisitor depicted in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I think that that makes like usually it makes like Eisenhorn and Gaunt's Ghost and stuff stand out, is that you can actually have a romance plot, because anything involving Space Marines is just completely sexless, like literally and metaphorically.
And yet, in this story, Ragnar, like, again, I suspect the reason that he is not as sexist as a normal Space Marine is because, unlike most of them, he actually had sex before he became a Space Marine.
He's one of the few canonically non-virgin Space Marines.
Yeah, literally.
Fair enough.
What a Chad.
What a Chad.
Space.
That's why they made him. That's why they made him a Wolf Lord.
That's why they made him Primaris. He became Primaris. The Chad Primaris.
He is a Primaris now. He got it in.
Oh no!
Yeah, I think in one of the supplements for 8th edition, they had a little plot.
He got Primarified fighting Guzkul.
Yes,
like the Uber Orc.
Yes, the biggest and baddest of the lot in 40k.
What do you mean? I do wonder if Primaris is this like Super Saiyan?
No, so Guzkul beat the shit out of him to the point that he was dying, and one of the options for people who are beaten to the brink of death now is rather than being put in a dreadnought, you undergo the Primaris surgery, and if you are a named character, you won't die.
I was going to say, like, surely this would be always the best option. All those poor guys that were put into dreadnoughts, so they could have just become Primaris.
Becoming Primaris has a risk of dying, which I would love if some named character tried to undergo the Rubicon Primaris and just ate shit and died. It'll never happen. But
it's never going to happen.
Lucius.
So, anyway,
yeah, okay,
we've got that. I think that's basically the end of the story. They go back, they save the day. Oh, wait. Oh,
yes.
Prophecies. At this point, we find out the Inquisitor was being misled, but we realize that, hang on a minute, the Space Wolf prophecies still said that we need to bring this here. So we still clearly have a purpose doing that. So that's why they turn around. So they've actually got the conflicting. They've got the Inquisitor's prophecies, and the Inquisitor is being misled by his. I think like the implication was that Ghoul is like fiddling with it or like influencing them to do this.
Yes.
But the Space Wolf prophecies are not being influenced like that, and they still say do this. So they realize, well, if this prophecy said it, then we're still good to go here with something, right? So that's what makes them go back in and save the day.
Yeah. So logically, it would make sense that let's say they didn't come here with the key. If they'd never come here with the key, then at some point the prison would have failed anyway, at which point you'd have had an unclean one unleashed on the planet and the rest of the universe with no Space Marines with the magic sealing key.
Well, not necessarily, because I think the idea here was that it kind of leaks a little bit every now and then when a comet passes or something, and that's it.
Well, so he says that the unclean one or something says that his prison has been weakening over time. I mean, we don't have any sort of scale of time or how long it would actually take.
Okay.
I don't think, but it seems to suggest that it might leak out.
What also, this is where we find out. Just leave that planet.
just leave it and just like steal off the planet.
Just declare it like, nope, dead world. Nobody gets to live here. We have reasons for it because it's
one of the most important imperial industry planets. It supplies half the sector.
God damn it!
You can't do that.
God damn it!
This is also where we find out that Ghoul was behind the sailor versus Space Marine fisticuffs adventure.
Yes, a regrettable time.
Oh, and also Kara dies.
Yes, Yes, she
But
does.
we had to have her in a tragic ending because we can't ever fulfill this romance subplot because Ragnar's pee-pee don't work. So we have to kill her off. We have to kind of... It's a little bit depressing nowadays. They basically Frigga-san just because they can't finish that romance subplot in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah, this felt very familiar to me, to the second Gaunt's Ghost book. I was getting some major vibes of the Inquisitor just disappearing into the warp gate with the Eldar or whatever it was,
never to be seen again,
and never to return. As to, like, in this case, she kind of gets trapped. His soul gets trapped in the thing with the Eldar ghosts, never to be seen again.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the same sort of weirdly veiled kind of romance thing, and then she dies / disappears.
And then the book cuts off, and we go back to the present. And Ragnar thinks about Lord Botulism. So this is something I wanted to touch on. We've commented on Abnett having a tendency to just suddenly stop. King also does this, except he suddenly stops and then has a bookend.
And tries to smooth things over a little bit, but I don't know whether I'd say that the epilogues do.
Yeah,
it's the best job of that.
Yeah, it's still like immediately before the epilogue, it's still just cut hard mid-story, like harder than Abnett, in my opinion. And then you have an epilogue, which isn't really the story.
Well, here's a good question. As we're going forward through it, we're going to go through a lot of 40k stories, and we should see how they end, because I kind of get the impression that sudden stop is actually more common than not among 40k writers.
I think so. But Kings were noticeably hard stop. Abnett often does that, but he'll do like a soft... Abnett stops, but he'll usually do a soft stop, and then let's look around and see what people...
The thing about Abnett is it feels like there is so much more to go. That's just the way he writes. When he gets to that point, he feels like he could go on for long, because he is so dense, so well packed.
But also because most Abnett stories have got further to go on, because they are part of a series that has not ended yet. Because finish a goddamn series, Abnett.
You can't, because then you can't write any more books in that series.
Oh, Abnett's writing so many things. I mean, yeah, he's writing the series. He's also writing another series. He's writing, like, for Marvel. He is a very big name, at least within his sphere.
Yeah.
So worth noting that when I finished the third book as well, wasn't he? I was actually kind of amazed that the book was over. I was sitting there like, wait, what? Because it felt like it almost ended on a cliffhanger.
Hard cut.
It's a really hard cut. It's a janky cut as hell in the
It's incredible. We got to get to it. It's time. Is there anything more we need to say about Ragnar's Claw?
I think we've done
that's
everything.
Pretty much it.
So, what are our recommendations for Ragnar's Claw?
So, I don't think you can not read this book. I think you have to read. It's an experience that everybody should have once.
It is fun.
You guys have convinced me. Going into this, I was a bit sketchy about it. The first one was Space Wolf was definitely a recommend. Ragnar's Claw is a little bit dicier to me, because it feels like what Space Wolf did well was it wasn't coasting off what you knew about 40k already, and it was really going into. Whereas this feels like I thought, well, you'll probably want to know a bit, and now you've described it as like almost like a product catalog. But you are right, there are scenes from it that are just like, if you want scenes that are like something out of an action movie, if you want schlock, this is very good, and it is a rare example of a book that doesn't take itself too seriously in 40k.
It's a 40k book that reminds you of like a fun B action movie.
Yes.
This September, coming to cinemas near you.
No. This isn't the kind of one that gets seen in cinemas. This is the kind of movie you see.
DVD.
This is the kind of movie that you find on a VHS tape that's 20 years old that's being showcased on Red Letter Media. This is like a fun B movie. This is like Tremors or something.
This is like Raw Force.
This is one of the ones that turns up on like Best of the Worst, but is so stand ahead above, like heads and shoulders above everything else they do, that they just have to give it to this one.
Yeah.
Not exactly that. It's more that sometimes these ones like in the middle. They're good for what they do, and they're fun. In some cases, they don't even deserve to be on Best of the Worst.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like,
this is not a bad book. It's a solid B movie book.
Yeah. It is. It's not trying to be high art like Abnett. King is not writing high art, and he knows that. He's writing pulp fiction, and he's writing very good pulp fiction. It's not quite Tarantino tier pulp fiction, but it's getting there.
That's the key, I think, because like despite the subject matter he's writing about and like the lack of seriousness that he takes some of the subject matter, I think he's a pretty damn good writer, to be honest. And
so.
He doesn't, nobody's going to do character development quite like Abnett, but I feel like over the course of the series, he develops Ragnar incredibly well. There's few other characters.
He has even further to go, but we'll see that when we get to the final book. Because here's the thing: William King wrote 4 Ragnar
Lee
books.
Leitner wrote 2.
Yes.
So
there's the interesting thing when we get to is comparing King's Ragnar with Lee Leitner's Abnett. Ragnar. Not Abnett. Imagine him writing Abnett.
Oh no.
Now Abnett's a character
self-inserts, just like appears in the 40k world.
Wait, okay, so I think
ultimate fan fiction.
Space Wolf is just a solid recommend. This is a recommend if you will enjoy like a Pulp Fiction schlocky like B-movie action movie.
Yeah.
Also, I just think it's an experience. I think people have to see it. It's got to be done.
I actually think this book would make an incredible video game.
It really would. It would make a great Space Marine type thing. I mean, hey, just do the whole thing. Even adapt the odd romance. If Halo can do it, then 40k can do it.
Problem is, it would have to be on like PlayStation 1 or 2, and it would have to be like you'd have to
Fire
have, like,
Warrior
10
tier. So it would have to
polygons.
be absolutely god awful.
Polygons.
No, hell no.
10 polygons.
Fire Warrior. Fire Warrior
through,
is just so difficult.
The fact that it goes through these different environments and feels segmented like this makes me think of like. It makes me think of a way like it feels less
like the Tarzan PlayStation 1 game. Or like
sure,
Bandicoot or
fine. I was not going to say either of those things, but it feels less like a structure you'd see in a movie or a book. It feels more like the structure you'd see in a video game, and it would work well for it. That's a weird comment for me, but I'm going to throw that out there. Like it's occurred to me as we talked about it.
Weirdly, I think that hits the nail on the head there.
But yeah, I guess recommend if you're into that sort of thing as we've described it from me.
Definitely.
All right, so that's us for now. In our next episode, we will be looking at the 3rd book in the Space Wolf Omnibus, which is Grey Hunter.